Here we have the Security and Privacy Settings group in the Admin of IPS community. There are a lot of various settings in this group, some of which are very straightforward and I won't really go too deep into them. But on the whole, this settings group allows you to control some low-level security and privacy settings within the software that control things like when a user registers, how you verify their email address. Also controls the session on the software, which is, the session is when a user first visits the software, it controls and remembers them throughout their visit. But let's just quickly go down the list here. The first one is CAPTCHA, which is slightly confusing because we also reference CAPTCHA under the spam prevention settings group, which you can reference by searching the documentation. That CAPTCHA is for registration and things like that, that controls the initial entry of a user. This CAPTCHA adds CAPTCHA support to other areas, such as it says here, changing email address, changing password, and other more critical areas to keep bots from doing things like that. So let's say something tried to get into your account and they were somehow able to, the CAPTCHA has one more level of protection to keep it from changing your password or email address. A couple other important features here. This X-forwarded for IP matching is specifically for users that might be behind load balancers or proxies or firewalls. You'd only need to enable this if your specific environment requires it. You might be behind a corporate intranet where the public IP is different from your internal IP. And if that's the case, sometimes you need to enable the settings so IPS community understands what your actual IP is. But this is something you'd only want to enable if needed. Next thing is about lost passwords reminder method. You can either have the user be emailed a random password, or they can enter a new password. We do recommend email a random password because at least then you know that the person getting the new password has access to that email address. So it adds an extra layer of protection there. Other settings here, such as login key expiration, session expiration, matching the IP address. These are settings that you normally want to leave alone unless you have a specific need to change them. You may want to have sessions last longer. The login key is a security feature. And matching IP address during validation, we do recommend you leave on for extra security, but there are certain circumstances, such as behind a corporate intranet or firewall, where you might need to disable that to make things work correctly, and that's why this setting is there. We don't often recommend turning on match user browser session because browsers it's not an exact science. However, if you are concerned about security, you can turn this on, and if it works for you, then that is yet another layer of protection that we have built in here for the security of your community. The brute force section in here is to help protect you from people who might be trying to basically guess a password on an account. And this locks an account out for a certain amount of time that you can define here if it detects someone trying to brute force a login attempt. The setting here, allow images to be posted. There are ways where someone could maliciously post an image and redirect you or try to do something bad. Now, the IPS community software has a lot of built-in technology to do its best to make this risk as minimal as possible. As you can see, it ships with image posting to on. We do recommend you leave it on because after all, you're running a community here. And it wouldn't be much fun if people couldn't post images, if they couldn't post pictures of what they're doing and things like that. However, if security is a really, really grave concern to you, you can shut off this here as a global setting, and this will affect all areas of the suite, and no images will be allowed anywhere. Of course, you really want to think about this. You probably want to leave this on, and it's not something you want to worry too much because the software does have many built-in functions to mitigate any risk this may cause. The next one is about removing the ACP link from the community. When you're logged in as an administrator, at the top of the screen, it does show an admin link to make it easy for you to log in. Let me just show you that real quick over here. It's right up here in the corner. Just a quick link to the admin area. Now, you can choose to remove that link. Let's say you chose to rename the admin directory to something less obvious than /admin. You can remove the link there, and it's just another layer of security if you so choose to do that. That's purely a preference of the administrator. Use HTTPS for login. What this does is, the software normally uses just plain HTTP or whatever you put in conf global. What you can do here is, for just login functionalities, meaning admin CP login and the front end login, the software will instead use HTTPS, which is your SSL for security. You'd of course have to set that up correctly on your server, but if you're going to use SSL and the content of your community is not overly sensitive, let's call it middle of the road, this is a good option to sort of, at least you're securing the login process behind SSL, and then the rest of the community would not be behind SSL for just general day-to-day browsing. It's a nice middle road security. Again, not something you need to worry too much about unless security is a big concern for you. If security is a big concern, that's why we have these settings available to you, so everyone can tailor the software to their specific community needs. The next section is just about member interaction. New registration email validation. You can have it user then admin, means first it will send a new registration member an email, and if they validate their email, then an admin still has to further validate. The next, user email validation, simply sends them an email. If they validate the email, then they're activated. The third one, admin validation, it does not send them any email. It requires the admin to manually validate all members. And the fourth, none, instantly validates any registration. We recommend email validation because it's a nice, at least then you know their email address is real, but you don't have to manually approve them. However, we do have the settings in place. If your community is sensitive or if you want more control, you can manually admin validate user registrations. We don't really recommend completely shutting this off to none because there's absolutely no barrier to entry for spammers and things like that. So we do recommend you leave something on, but the choice is yours here. The next one about removing incomplete validations. That's for if people register and never validate their account by email. After, in this case, 15 days, the setting here, the software will automatically purge those members so they're not just sitting around. These people will probably never validate, and it cleans up your list. You can get notified to the administrator email address, to the incoming email address, and there's more information about that in the email setup settings group. You can force guests to log in before allowing access to the community. This is a global setting here, which if you toggle this setting to yes, no matter what you have elsewhere in the IPS community suite, you might have guests can view gallery, but they can't view blog. This will override all of those settings, and when someone visits your community, no matter what section that is not logged in, they will simply be prompted to either log in or register. They won't be able to do anything else until then. You can, of course, disable new registrations, and it fine grains it down to disable all, meaning no one can register, or just disable our internal registration method. And what that means is if you do this, you're forcing people to log in via Twitter or Facebook or some other alternative login method. And that's useful if you want every single member to also be linked with an external social network. You can do that here. This setting here about removing the special characters from input, well, it's not so much a security concern as much as it is more of a confusion thing, which of course confusion can become a security problem. And that's why we have this here. Basically you can input hidden characters that aren't really visible, and it can lead people to click things they might not realize. It's not something to be overly concerned about, but we do leave this setting on just for that extra layer of security. Flood control here, we have it set to 5 seconds by default, and basically it just means people have to wait 5 seconds before they can post again. Keeps people from flooding your forum, be they spammers or just overzealous members who might need to take a quick pause before they click post again. And finally, the last 3 settings about privacy. The browsing the active user list, that simply means being able to, the online user list at the bottom of the screens, can they browse it? Can they see what other people are doing in the community? That's purely a personal preference. There's no real security concern there. And even the privacy concern is fairly minimal, because at the end of the day, all they're going to show is what topic a user may be reading, or if they're in the blog or something like that. It doesn't show any content, it just shows the general area that they're in. Users can log in anonymously, and there are other settings that you can cross-reference in member groups where administrators or other options can see anonymous users. And basically what an anonymous user is, when they log in, they check a box, and they're not shown in the online user list. However, like I said, administrators can still see them, and they show a little asterisk next to their name in the online user list. And the last one is about displaying the version number of our software on your site. Some people choose to remove that because they don't want people to know if they might be a version or 2 behind. Maybe they didn't install the latest version, and they don't want people to know that. And that's purely a personal choice there. So that's security and privacy. These settings generally by default are pretty much the way you want them. However, in certain circumstances, you may wish to adjust them depending on the needs of your community.